Dry hairs for squids. Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, coming at you with another famed movie slash Blu-ray review of the Charles Band slash Empire Pictures classic, Trancers. So first I'm just going to, as always, I'm going to review the movie and then I'll review this Blu-ray release by Full Moon Features. Now I was, obviously like I said before, grew up in the 80s and stuff with the heyday of mom and pop video stores and things like this. And back in that time, the very first time Trancers was ever released on video was released by Vestron Video. So I'm sure I've seen the cover, which is more or less this cover. I'm sure I passed by the cover and seen it in my, growing up in the, mid to late 80s and 90s and stuff like that in the sci-fi section of any particular video store, but I never was interested enough to see it. I did end up buying a previously viewed, Vestron Video copy back when, Video Updates were selling off all their VHSs, and I saw it back in the day. I think I got all the Trancers movies actually from, on previously viewed VHS from the Video Updates when they were selling off all their VHSs. So I saw it probably in the maybe 2003, 4, 5-ish or something like that. And I never, I wasn't, I'm a kind of a fan of Tim Thomerson, not a huge fan, but I think he's relatively, he's just got that perfect look for this movie and just a really great. He's just got a really great thing about him. Tim Thomerson's really, his presence on screen, on film, is really a great presence. So that's one of the huge, pluses, of course, for this movie is really amazing. This movie, so like so many lower budget movies of, back then and even now, is kind of a rip-off of two more successful higher budget movies by the name of Blade Runner and Terminator. This is kind of like taking, Blade Runner and Terminator and mashing them together in a more less expensive $400 or so thousand budgeted movie. I will say, the very beginning of the movie, where they probably spent the majority of the budget in the first 9 or 10 minutes, it starts off really cool, where it's the future. I don't know what it's stated as being, 2247 in the future. Basically, we see, I think, whatever it's called. I don't know if it's, I don't know. I think it's basically LA or something like that at that time has been flooded out, kind of like what happens in Escape from LA. And we see a little bit of an action scene in this really kind of cool, kind of like film noir meets Blade Runner meets whatever, kind of cool scene at the beginning. And like I say, the movie starts off with really kind of pretty snazzy futuristic visuals and neon and all this kind of stuff that was prevalent, of course, in the mid-80s. This movie came out in '85. And all this and that, and we see an action scene, and basically, from what I understand, the title Trancers, obviously these people become, these weak-minded people become entranced, and I'm not still 100% sure why this happens or what causes it to happen, but basically a trancer is just a person who becomes entranced. I don't know if it's, in this case, the bad guy of this movie taking control of people and making them, weak-minded people do his bidding or whatever. But there's a little action scene or whatever at this diner at the beginning of the movie, and some other cool productions design stuff later on in the futuristic scene. Basically, long story short, being a rip-off of Terminator in the aspect where these three council members or whatever, these three bigwigs in the future in this 2247 or whatever, basically this bad guy's sent his consciousness back into a former. That's one thing that's cool about this movie, the time travel aspect, which is really cool, is not getting in a time machine and going back like in a DeLorean, but it's more like sending your consciousness. Your body stays there, but somehow of course it's sci-fi, so they don't explain how, but they send your consciousness back to an ancestor of yours, back in whatever time you want to go to. So this bad guy sent his consciousness back, of course, into a body that looks just like his body in the future, but whatever, he's taking liberties. So he can basically kill the descendants who would end up, being, so if you kill just like Terminator, if you kill the people that, these bigwigs in the future came from, then the bigwigs never exist, and whatever. One of the bigwigs out of two has already been killed by this guy, so the remaining two basically basically are giving Jack Death, played by Tim Thomerson, this task of basically going down the line back to 1985 or whenever this movie takes place, Los Angeles, and trying to catch this bad guy by sending his own consciousness down the line, as it's termed in the movie, into a former descendant or of his, which of course, just like the bad guy, looks exactly like him. One of the cool plot points is that in the future, the character Jack Death, I think, actually has actually has like black hair, like his hair's actually dyed, and he's got like this scar. So one cool thing about him being transported into another body of a descendant or whatever is that he's got his normal kind of Tim Thomerson gray hair and no scars. So that's kind of cool. They do make they make him look a little different in that regard. This movie also features a very young, I don't know if it's late teens, early 20s, probably early 20s, Helen Hunt. Apparently Charlie Band knew Helen Hunt's dad, so I don't know, I imagine somehow because of that she ended up in this movie. Of course, her being not a big name back in the back at this time, she was easily acquirable. But long story short, my take on Trancers is the best thing about the movie, of course, is Tim Thomerson. Oh, it should be noted that this screenplay was written by Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo, who would of course go on to create and produce and write some of the very first Flash television series that debuted, I think, in 1990 and went to 91 or whatever, and of course go on to write the screenplay for the movie. I don't know if they were the only writers, but they were part of the writers for the screenplay, of course, Rocketeer, which is one of my favorite movies. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I've already reviewed it, of course, years ago. So I think this was actually the first screenplay of theirs that actually got made based on already existing material that they, were given, I think, probably by Charlie Band or something like that to work on. Overall, this movie starts off relatively strong, but for me, like when it gets to the, I don't know, halfway point or maybe more like 50-minute point or something like that, it really kind of slows down when after the action in 1985 LA, and I mean it's really moves along at a nice pace when Thomerson first gets there, and basically waking up in the morning after he and the guy who actually inhabited his body that he ends up taking over just picked up Helen Hunt's character and gotten together and spent the night and had sex the night before. And when Tim Thomerson, Jack Death character, takes over that character's consciousness, it's like the next morning and whatever, and all of a sudden, his, obviously because it's a different consciousness in the body, the attitude of that guy just completely changes. Of course, we never got to see what the guy was like before Jack Death's consciousness was entered into it, but whatever. Kind of funny, where basically every time he gets sucked out of it by his boss or whatever, and come back to the future, he misses sex with Helen Hunt or whatever, and then he gets shipped back down the line only to be reinstated into his body after they've already had sex. So that's kind of a little funny thing. Also, it's kind of cool little plot point and funny that basically his boss, I don't know if he's a chief, whatever the hell he is in the future, could only find like a, I don't know, 11-year-old girl or something like that, descendant, to, basically go down the line and have it to visit Jack Death in the, 1985 path, which is really cool because he got this like 11-year-old girl talking like whatever, mid-40s, or late 40s male. So that's kind of a cool little plot point. Basically, a lot of things about this movie are written in a way where you can get away with these really cool ideas like time travel and also these really cool thing of just inhabiting former descendants' bodies without any budget. You don't need a budget to do that. You just kind of say this is what's happening, and you just have 11-year-old girl pretend like she's an old man or older man, and it kind of just works. Another really cool point about this movie that has really nothing to do with budget except for just having to get a real high-speed camera to film the slow-mo sequences, of course, I think what's called a long second watch, where it's just like a watch with this one-time thing where you press it in a dire situation where you need to basically stop time for 10 seconds, and you can move freely around whatever, your environment or whatever, while your, enemies or whoever, whatever, are just kind of like just stopped in time for 10 seconds and you can do whatever, which is used relatively cleverly for twice in this movie. So this movie's got, really kind of cool ideas, but of course it shows its budget being, meaning that it's a really low budget movie. And for me, like I say, after the first half or so, with the kind of cool action stuff and the tanning, salon funny thing, and when they get, when basically Jack Death and Helen Hunt's, or Tim Thomerson and Helen Hunt's character get together and, go to her, apartment place, it kind of, for me, from then on, the movie's kind of boring. So I'm going to go 2 stars out of 4 for Trancers. Definitely probably wouldn't be that high had Tim Thomerson not been in the movie, or Helen Hunt. And I mean, I'm not a Helen Hunt fan, but Tim Thomerson obviously is what really makes this movie great. And interestingly enough, you'd think that Richard Band would have done the music for this, but maybe he was doing the music for something else at the time. But it's two other guys end up doing the music for this movie, which I guess kind of fits with the movie. I think it works. Whatever, it's not a big deal. So, not the biggest fan in the world of Trancers. Maybe if I'd grown up with it, maybe I'd like it more. Maybe it'd have a more near and dear place in my heart. But because of Tim Thomerson and some of the relatively cool writing and stuff they get away with on a low budget, I'll give it, like I say, 2 out of 4 stars. Blu-ray is pretty fantastic. I think I ended up getting this for like maybe $10 or $11 on Amazon. I can happily say that the image quality of this particular Blu-ray, this recent remaster, is pretty dynamite. It's got a really nice film, it retains its film quality, its filmic, 35mm appearance. There doesn't, appear to be any, noise reduction that I can see. It's just a nice 35mm film appearance. So the image side of it's really good. I mean, who would ever thunk that you'd see these like Empire Charlie Band movies that, to look this good? It's really kind of a treat to see these movies in this kind of quality. So pretty much thumbs up for the image quality of Trancers Blu-ray. I mainly got it for the commentary. Back in years past, I signed up for a trial run without having to pay anything of fullmoonstreaming.com, and I was able to hear the commentary for this particular title on that, and I really liked it. It's got a commentary featuring Charlie Band and Tim Thomerson, no moderation, nothing, so it's really cool to listen to those guys talk. Tim Thomerson's so funny on commentaries. Oftentimes being older now, 70 or whatever the hell he is, he'll see himself in the, his younger, more spry, 40-year-old years, and he'll just marvel at, the sight himself in those years, saying, "Wow, look at, man, I got muscles all over the place. My pecs are just raining. Look at my guns, my lats," all this shit, and Charlie Band is just laughing. Understandably so. I mean, Tim Thomerson's just a fun guy, and he's, this Blu-ray is just worth it just for the commentary. And as a matter of fact, I would kind of more recommend, once you hit the 50-minute mark of the movie, to just switch the audio from the soundtrack to the commentary, because it's much more entertaining for the remainder of the movie to listen to that, or maybe even the whole movie. But the commentary by those two guys is fantastic on this movie. It features like a 14-minute retrospective video with retrospective interviews with Tim Thomerson, Charlie Band, and I think the two writers. They just sit around for 14 minutes or so, cutting back and forth between all those different people, talking about a little bit of the history of this project, how it came to be, and whatever like that. So that's kind of cool. Other features are, it says a rare interview with Tim Thomerson and Megan Ward, but it's just something that was probably featured on the Video Zone for Trancers 2 back in the early 90s or whatever. It's not very long or not that big a deal. And then one of the cool things about this movie is it actually features this complete short, which is called Trancers City of Los Angeles, which was actually made for this 3-part, kind of anthology film called Pulse Pounders that Charlie Band / Empire Films did back in the 1988, I think, like that. So it's kind of like the first true Trancers sequel that actually features an older version of that younger girl who plays the body of the consciousness of his boss, and Helen Hunt comes back, and I think it's from the writers, Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo, of the original movie. And it's like a 24-minute short, because I assume there's 3 24-minute stories in this Pulse Pounders things, which I don't think ever really came out, but you can see evil clergymen, and I think the other thing said to be the Dungeon Master sequel or something like that. So it does feature that whole 24, I think it's 24 minutes-ish, you know, basically Trancers sequel, I guess, if you want to call it. The quality is not so great as like a work print version with, sounds like added, you know, recently added, you know, soundtrack from Trancers movie added to it. So it's you know, for Trancers fans, it's definitely probably a must-see. It's more, you know, it's kind of more unofficial Jack Death goings on. It's kind of like an episode of a TV show, really. It's the same length. So that's also featured on here. The, you know, the Trancers City of Los Angeles segment from the Pulse Pounders trilogy. It says Rare Still Gallery. Just like so many full moon movies, this says it's got 5.1 surround and 2-channel stereo. I only listened, of course, to 2-channel stereo, and it sounds like mono to me. I imagine that back when this movie came out and was made, in 1985, I don't think, you know, Empire would have been bothering with stereo yet, so I'm not too sure the original movie was stereo. So obviously having this movie in mono, if it was originally in mono, is not a big deal, but I can say that as far as I'm concerned, this sounds like mono, like so many full moon Blu-rays, even ones from the 90s that were originally released in stereo. I don't know why so many of the full moon Blu-rays are appearing anyway, what appears to be mono, which is kind of a bummer for some of the, you know, later full moon movies. But, you know, the movie's not so much recommended, but the Blu-ray is pretty slam bang package for a full moon release. The commentary is something, it's basically a must-hear commentary. You know, Charlie Band and Tim Thomerson sitting next to each other for the duration of the movie, which is 80 plus minutes, just talking crap or whatever. And every single commentary I see, you know, with Tim Thomerson, and at the end he's like, "You're gonna edit this, right?" And Charlie Band's like, "No, you're not gonna edit it." He's like, "Edit the swear words out and stuff." No, it's just like us in the living room talking. So Tim Thomerson's a fun guy, and the commentary track's probably the funnest part of this whole release. So, like I say, not necessarily, you know, crazily recommended movie, but definitely recommended Blu-ray if you can pick it up for, you know, $10, $11, $12. So thank you very much for watching this movie / Blu-ray review of Charlie Band's Trancers. And definitely catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching.